This is interesting, and I got to be honest with you, I'm not sure how I feel about this. So Alex Jones now, he has not been completely deplatformed, but iTunes is no longer carrying his podcast. Facebook has pulled down, I guess, 4 of his pages. Spotify has pulled his podcast, but the Spotify, I think, must get it. Well, I guess, yeah, Spotify is... I don't know where else you can get his podcast. You probably can serve it directly. I honestly don't know what I feel about this. I mean, I know what I feel about Alex Jones. And ostensibly, iTunes has said Apple does not tolerate hate speech. We have clear guidelines that creators and developers must follow to ensure that we provide a safe environment for all our users. Like, I don't know how you can justify like carrying like Laura Ingram's show. Yeah. Right? I mean,
I think the Daily Showa is on a bunch of these platforms still.
5 of the 6 Infowars podcasts have been removed. They ostensibly violate their guidelines. Part of the problem is that places like Facebook, iTunes are monopolies. And they have not just too much power from a corporate side, but it's also, it makes things like this more problematic, right? Because if there's no other mechanism for him to get to pump out spew out his bullshit, it's a little bit of a problem. And I'm not quite clear where this ends. And it's not like this isn't going to help his business. I mean, he's going to be fine. It's not going to go away. It's not, whatever the goals are not going to be met by this. And they're certainly not doing it. Apple and Facebook and Spotify, they're not doing it because they came to this on their own. They're doing it because of pressure. And I understand. And in the main, I don't have an issue with like saying don't advertise on this thing or whatnot. But when you are the distribution mechanism and it's so consolidated, and I have a feeling the solution is to have less consolidated distribution mechanisms, which means that we need to start thinking about antitrust for all of these monopolies of distribution. But when you're the distribution mechanism, I think it starts to get pretty problematic. Maybe you could demonetize, but to silence in that way is a little bit. I mean, look here, and this gets back to my time with Mike Cernovich and even the James Gunn. At one point, these corporations that are involved in disseminating or providing the vehicle for dissemination of this type of content, and news organizations, because they're in the business of assessing reality on some level, right? And presenting it back to us. Everybody's going to have to just start exercising their brains a little bit more, right? We're still coming out of an era where there's this notion of, which was always false, but there was this pretense of objectivity. And the right was very effective for a long time in making media entities in particular and corporations bend over backwards not to allow reality to in any way impose upon them, right? Like, you can't call me racist even though I have a problem with black people, because that's the worst thing you can say to somebody. And then you have media organizations, which I would say are, broadly speaking, more sympathetic, or more simpatico, I should say, with, broadly speaking, not necessarily the political agenda of liberalism, but just sort of like the broad notion of being liberal. And they bend over backwards to sort of cater to these morons. And the problem is that they did so while still trying to maintain some type of objective facade. But I think it's like, at one point, these entities are going to have to step up and say, you know what, we can assess things. If Sam Seder writes a tweet in response to an attempt to allow Roman Polanski to get a Lifetime Achievement Award, despite the fact that he's a convicted, on-the-run statutory rapist who had escaped, who ran from the country because he was afraid that he was going to get a bad plea deal from the judge, or the judge didn't accept the plea deal. And he writes a piece of satire that says, I will say it again because I'm not embarrassed by it, I don't care about Roman Polanski. This is from memory, but I think it was, I don't care about Roman Polanski, but if my daughter is ever raped, I hope it's by a much older man with a great sense of mise en scène. No one who knows what the words mise en scène mean would have any mistake in interpreting what that tweet was meant to project, right? People don't say like, hey, he said that time flies. I don't know, like time doesn't fly. He's lying. No, it's an idiom. And if you can understand an idiom, you can understand satire. People have to step up. And by people, I mean corporations are going to have to do this, particularly if you're in the content business. And if you're news media, you have to step up and you have to make an assessment. Despite the fact that there may be people who are clamoring on either side of anything, and make a determination as to what it is. In other words, like if you make it about a broad policy, instead of like your ability to assess, because you're afraid of being pegged a righty or a lefty or whatnot, you're just going to be in this quicksand. The reason why you deplatform Alex Jones is because he's spreading disinformation as if it was news. And I know that people are like, well, we can't, who are we to say what news is? You know what? You're an entity that says what news is. And if you lose customers, good. There should be multiple of these platforms. That's the only way this is going to work going forward, because this isn't going to work. This is just going to keep, it's going to be haphazard. It's going to be, these companies are playing politics. And what they should just do is like, we make an assessment about what reality is and we stand by it. And that's why there should be multiple Facebooks. That's why there should be multiple platforms for podcasts. So that people, if they have a disagreement with that, then that's fine. I mean, I don't know. There is no solution to Fox News, which is full of crap. There is no solution. You can't say to cable carriers, don't carry them. Right? Because they carry the Sci-Fi Channel. And none of that stuff is real either. That's all. I got news for you. The Sci-Fi Channel, almost 100% of the programming, is completely fictional.
I think X-Files is more real than people like to think.
But that's the problem that we have. These entities are going to have to make assessments. And people are going to have to learn to either like say like, oh, this company makes assessments that are rational and grounded. News companies are going to have to make assessments. That's why they have all those resources, right? I mean, ostensibly it's to let us know about our world. And you have to be able to say, Alex Jones it's crap. And this is satire, and that is not satire. Like, the idea of good faith has to actually be a little less squishy. Alex Jones is not delivering the truth as he thinks it is. Alex Jones is delivering bullshit. And sometimes it's incredibly offensive and destructive. And so a company should be able to say, we're just not going to platform him. But there should be other opportunities for him to get platformed by other crappy companies.
I can't help but think about when people like Mark Zuckerberg maybe 8 years ago talked about how disruptive and amazing the types of things their platforms were going to do for society. And now it's sort of like, oh shit, what have we actually done? And now we need to fix problems, and we have a much more humble tasks ahead of us. And we can just help
except
where we
for
can.
What he was really interested in, we're going to make a ton of cash.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, they're going to get all of the media outlets dependent on Facebook for traffic and then ransom it back to them. And now they're changing their formula so that you can't even buy back your traffic that you used to have from Facebook. Like, they have, call me crazy, but like, I don't think it's a good idea for a single private company to have control over the entire fourth estate.
Absolutely.
You're crazy, James.
And this is, I mean, ultimately, this is why we've got to break up things like Facebook. And the way that you do it, I mean, maybe we'll have somebody on to talk about how one would do that. But everybody has ideas. You can disaggregate parts of it. You can have regulations in terms of what can be linked and what can't be linked. I mean, this is going to have to happen, folks, because the brave new world is really not turning out so good.
I vote expropriate, but that's probably not a surprise.
Right, but I think like you could cut it up into small enough purposes that in some ways you are expropriating the value, at least a huge chunk of the value, and you're disseminating it, and you're reassigning it. I mean, look, they did it with the phone company.
Yeah, there is certainly a case for nationalizing infrastructure. Like, that's not necessarily a communist idea.
We do it. I mean, we've done it with we're doing it on some level with steel, right? I mean, that's not necessarily a taking in that instance, but all right. Here is what is this? This is Vic Berger's compilation of Alex Jones, just to remind you of just how sort of despicable he is.
All I know is psychopaths operate. They're not human. I don't like them. Okay. You know, I don't want this to have ever happened, but I wish it was real instead of fake. That is 100 times more scary. Sandy Hook is a synthetic, completely fake, with actors, in my view, manufactured. It's more than these dead poor children. You got to go with your gut, man. My gut tells me I've never felt this freaked out. It just is the fakest thing since the $3 bill. And you better get ready for more of it, folks. Anderson Cooper turns. He's supposedly there at Sandy Hook in front of the memorial, and his whole forehead and nose blurs out. Anderson Cooper has got some explaining to do, because I know blue screen when I see it. They clearly used actors. I mean, they even ended up using photos of kids killed in mass shootings here in a fake mass shooting in Turkey. So, yeah. Or Pakistan. I will sit there on the air and look at every position and play devil's advocate.
Was that devil's advocate? The whole thing is a giant hoax. The whole thing was fake.
The Sandy Hook hoax. The whole thing was fake. Yes, because I remember even that day, I'll go back from memory, then saying, but then some of it looks like it's real. But then what do you do when they've got the kids going in circles in and out of the building with their hands up? I've watched the footage, and it looks like a drill. Walking in circles, in and out.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, this guy is a malignant force. He's a scourge. And so in that respect, I think it's fine. But we do have a bigger problem. And really, it's basically just going to have to become down where people are going to have to make assessments. And we're going to have to break up these platforms and make them not as important. So the idea of a platform saying, hey, we don't want to be associated with this is not that big of a deal for that person or that entity. And people who want some semblance of reality will congregate in one place, and people who want that type of stuff, they'll go and find it. And that happens in society all the time, right? I mean, before we had an internet, if you want to read garbage magazines, you could read garbage magazines. You just go and pick it up. And when you buy it, it's self-contained.
And also on the other end of the spectrum, maybe some public grants for actual journalism are in order, because it's been really hard to watch my industry get completely destroyed by the market. And, if we are in an info war and there is some public value in having accurate news sources out there, then we got to do something about it.
Of course. And I think the more you break that stuff up, then the less concerning any possible legitimate concerns about a so-called state-run media or a state paid for media go out the window if you have a dozen other outlets.
And people act like we don't have like state-run media. If you watch a local news report, half the stories are just press releases from the local police department.
Yes, or from corporations.
Right.